For Monday, May 4th, 2020 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the Special Public Open Meetings Act promulgated by Governor Inslee's emergency order. City Clerk, please do the roll call.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Present.
Councilmember Keel.
Present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, present.
Councilmember Fleming.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, present.
And Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi here.
Mayor
Sorry.
Mayor Belisi and members of the City Council. Also joining us tonight are Steve Sugg, City Manager, Matt Kaser, City Attorney, Jack Eklund, Engineering and Capital Projects Director, David Swindale, Planning and Development Services Director, Gary Cooper, Public Works, Parks and Facilities Director, and Jennifer Hales, Public Safety Administrator. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Before we start conducting our city business, we have a few special rules I want to go over with everyone. First, there is no public comment or testimony for tonight. For members of the public who are listening or joining us remotely, please recognize that you have had the opportunity and that the opportunity remains to submit your public comment by email. Comments received before 5:30 deadline will be electronically provided to City Council for their consideration. Comments received after that deadline will be electronically provided to City Council after the meeting. Secondly, for City Council members, for our proceedings tonight, we will do the round robin method in the sequence showing in the speaking chart that our City Clerk has provided each of you to ensure orderliness of our meeting and that everyone has a chance to speak. We will use the same method for council to comment or ask question on items listed for study tonight. And lastly, given the special circumstances, please also note that in the event of technical difficulties, all items on this agenda shall be carried over to the agenda for May 18th, 2020 regular meeting. With that, may I ask Council Member Kent Keel to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Keel. May I call for a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve this evening's agenda.
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Are there any objections to approval of the agenda? Hearing none, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. Our next item is our public comment portion. As of this evening, prior to our meeting, we received no public comment. Our next item on the agenda is our consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda?
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Are there any objections to approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is our city manager report. City Manager Steve Sugg.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and the public that is watching online to this virtual council meeting. Welcome. My city manager's report tonight starts off with a brief description of the governor's order last Friday. The Governor Inslee extended the stay-at-home order, the stay-at-home, stay healthy order, to May 31st. As you know, it was originally scheduled for May 4th. It's been extended now to May 31st. At the same time, the governor also announced his Safe Start Plan, which is a four-phased plan to reopen Washington State's economy. Details of that can be found at www.governor.wa.gov. They've got a PDF document that nicely outlines his four-phased approach towards reopening the state. Now, consistent with that governor's order and under local control, we had a decision to make as to whether to keep our parks closed or to open them. We want, like the governor said on Friday, to allow some outdoor recreation, but do it responsibly with safe social distancing. We're under the phase 1 of the reopening, which is still pretty restrictive, but it's a little less restrictive. For example, golf courses and fishing and other types of outdoor recreation and boating is allowed under this phase 1 approach by the governor. Our local parks provide important recreation and outdoor tranquility for folks that want to get outside and enjoy open spaces. So consistent with that, we are doing a phased reopening of our city parks. Parking lots will be open. However, park restrooms will remain closed. Information regarding the reopening of city parks has been posted on the city's Facebook page as of this morning. Continue to check with the Facebook page as we will provide updates as conditions change. Then we want to make sure that that this information gets distributed across our other platforms. And this Wednesday, we will be issuing a new headline electronic newsletter. Among the many articles will be an article on this city parks reopening. So please note that we will continue to monitor our parks facilities, and any overcrowding, overuse of these parks may result in immediate closures. We want to comply and be safe and and obviously keep everyone healthy. And then finally, a piece of really good news, our Chambers Creek Road sidewalk project between Bridgeport and the westerly end of Charles Wright Academy, in front of Charles Wright Academy. There's going to be curbs, gutters, and sidewalks eventually built along that section. We were notified by Puget Sound Regional Council last week that we were approved to advance $255,000 of grant funding for the design of that road. And originally that funding was only available in 2021. It's been moved up to 2020. So now we have access to those funds and can proceed with design and being reimbursed for those expenditures. We don't have to use our city funds for that. So hopefully this will position us if next year's funding opens up to advance construction dollars for that important project. And with that, I'll turn it back to the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sugg. At this time, we are open for council comments. Council member Figueroa, do you have any comments at this time?
Sorry, I had it on mute. No, thank you.
Okay. Council member Kent Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I just have a couple comments. I am very excited about the dollars. The city manager talked about PSRC, but we also know that there are other dollars that are coming to the city through the CARES Act. I know that we as a city have to figure out what it is that we're going to do and how we can use them. But my sincere hope is there's a way that we can figure out how to use those dollars. The sum is, some $993,000 that potentially could come to the city. And my interest as one council member would be to work with staff and my colleagues to figure out a way that we can leverage those dollars to help small businesses within University Place. Those businesses that were negatively affected by this pandemic. I'm also very interested in seeing if we can get some dollars support to the employees of those small businesses in University Place, homeowners that have been affected through their jobs, renters that may have been affected, as well as any property owners that have done some things to help people that couldn't pay their rent, on time. So that's my interest. And as we move forward, I know there's still a lot of questions that have to be answered and asked. The federal government's doing a bunch of stuff now, but as those things become clear, I just want to make sure that my colleagues know that that's my interest and what I can do to move that part forward. That's what I'll be working on. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Early last week, I spoke with Steve King, who is the director of Families Unlimited Network, our University Place food bank, which is located next to the University Place Presbyterian Church at Sunset and 27th. The food bank has operated there over 12 years, serving citizens who are struggling to feed their families. They've always been busy, but nothing like they are now since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. Currently, they serve approximately 130 families a week, or 500 individuals. They are those receiving food products and household products simply drive up. Volunteers give them 2 bags of a generic selection of canned and fresh food. The volunteers are almost exclusively Curtis students who are earning the volunteer hours that are required to have in order to graduate. Donating food and household products is just as easy too. Drive up and volunteers will take your donation. Families Unlimited Network is a 501c3, so your donations may be federally income tax deductible. However, Steve assured me that if it's easier for you to make a donation of cash, he'll most gladly take that too. Please don't forget those in our community who may be in need, because we are truly in this as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Councilmember McCluskey.
How about now?
Yeah, there you
Councilmember
go.
McCluskey, I have no comment at this time. Thank you.
Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to echo the comments that Councilmember Keel made a few moments ago. I think the city is very fortunate on 2 points. One is to receive the go-ahead for the design work for sidewalks in the city, making it safer for pedestrians. It has always been a priority of the city, and I really applaud the efforts that the city staff has done to get this grant, to get this particular project that's been on the books for several years underway. Now, with regards to the stimulus money, certainly those categories that were aforementioned are important to all of us. However, it's going to, I wish we had more funding to distribute it to all those that are in need. I think what's going to be more important, instead of having a couple of dollars for larger populations, is really to prioritize those organizations such as our small businesses especially when you look at the latest statistics that say roughly 43% of small businesses will never reopen after this pandemic is concluded. Our city is built on small business. We rely on them for the backbone of this community. And so I hope that when we start prioritizing those dollars, that we will look to the small businesses to get them back on their feet, to get them back into business and really revitalize and rejuvenate our community. You know, certainly those that are in need, I know families across the spectrum are struggling right now to make ends meet now that we've gone through the first full month where income has been slashed, not just reduced, but seriously slashed. And so hopefully we can put our efforts to good work to try to help at least alleviate a little bit of that pain and suffering that people are experiencing right now, and keeping them all in mind. So with that, that's really all I had to add to this evening. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, let's see, thank you, Mayor. This evening, I really don't have any further comments to make. I'm sure some things will come up during the study session, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I will close this segment by echoing what my fellow council members have said about the CARE Act stimulus payment that the city received, and I look forward to working with our council on figuring out the best method that we can utilize to reach the most vulnerable in our community, both individuals as well as business members. With that, the only update I have is that on April 30th, myself and Councilmember Keel attended a virtual meeting for the South Sound Homeless or Housing Affordability Project. He attended as a representative from Sound Transit and I as mayor of University Place. The meeting basically discussed the various housing options that are available for building affordable housing, and provided a schedule to us of all the different federal, state, and county grants that are out there. But the basic giveaway is, or takeaway from that meeting, was the difficulty that builders have in addressing the affordable housing needs, that no one funding source will take care of a project from beginning to end, and that in order to build affordable housing units in a community, it requires the various entities at all levels, the funding agencies, to come together and cobble the money together to be able to produce that. And that is one reason that it's been a very difficult endeavor for a normal housing builder to be able to comply with the funds and the requirements. But I will I will get the listing of all that funding and send it out to you, council members, so that you are aware of the different housing options that are the funding options that are out there for housing. So we are continuing to look at how we can work as a region on coming together, either from a regulatory standpoint or working on a project that might benefit us on a regional level and supporting that. So we're doing some great work, and hope to have some more information as we get into more of the weeds of this, as opposed to the skyline view that the committee has currently worked on. So with that, our council comments are concluded. So at this time, we are going into our study session. We are reviewing our next agenda item, which is our 6-year transportation improvement plan for the years 2021 to 2026. And with that, I will turn over our screen to Jack Eklund for his presentation to us. Mr. Eklund.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. So as mentioned tonight, I'm bringing to you for your study our annual update to our 6-year transportation improvement program or plan, which is also referred to as our TIP. Now, we're required by state law to adopt and annually update this TIP. And as you mentioned, this year's update covers the years from 2021 to 2026. I'm going to bring up for you guys to see just some quick updates of what this TIP has this year. So don't have a lot of changes in this year. We have added one new project, and this project is in your council packet. You'll see the full spreadsheet and document of the TIP, but so if you look at project number 7 is actually a new project called out separately, and that's for the a roundabout at Chambers Creek Road and 64th, which is right at the top of the hill by the cemetery and the bus barn. That actually, although it's a new separate project, previously that had been part of the Chambers Creek Road Phase 2 corridor project. So we've now split that out as a separate one to be able to take advantage if any funding opportunities arrive that could do for just the individual intersection. The next major change is project number 24, which is Lemons Beach Road, 31st Street and Parkway. That's kind of the windy road behind University Place Primary. That one we have also split into 2 phases, and these 2 phases are based on each side of the road. And the reason we're doing that is also just in the case we have an availability for grant opportunities. There will be later this year a Safe Routes to School call for project, and so some of these grant programs have smaller scale projects, and so by splitting it into half of the road, we maybe would be able to connect into that, be able to apply for half a road instead of a full thing. And then finally, as with every year, the project schedules and all the costs have been updated to the current, our current most recent information. As a reminder, the approval of the 6-year transportation plan does not commit the city to any financial expenditures. Rather, each project will be reviewed individually by the city council in each relevant budget cycle as a component of the capital improvement plan. Approval of this plan, however, does create eligibility for the city to apply for various grant opportunities. Many grant funding sources require a project in question to be on our TIP, and then also just having the TIP will give other jurisdictions an indication of what our transportation planning needs and goals are. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, with that, Council Member Figueroa, do you have any comments or questions at this time?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Council Member Kent Keel. Are you unmuted, Mr. Keel? Okay, Council Member Pro Tem Lee.
Council Member Pro Tem Lee, I have no question.
Council Member McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey, thank you, Mayor. I do have a couple comments. I'm really excited to see the movement of splitting these projects on the list so that we could fast track those 2 roads. The T intersection at Chambers Bay going behind the bus barn, I think is very critical. And also Lemons Beach Road, 31st, going over into Parkway. I see not only children walking to school, but also people, especially with the nicer weather, going out and walking. And there's a lot of blind areas for vehicles approaching pedestrians. And so I think that is a urgent need to address in our city as well. So thank you for being proactive and separating them out so we can have funding sooner than later, I hope, fingers crossed. And otherwise, I am good. Thank you, Mayor.
Council Member Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Jack has done an outstanding job in really describing what these projects are, setting the priorities for the 6-year TIP. I absolutely look forward to moving these projects forward, and I really commend Jack for the work he's done on it. He's certainly taken time to answer my questions previous to this, so I'm quite satisfied. So thank you, and good job, Jack. Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you. I think I have a good understanding of the project, and the addition on Chambers Road there is something we can use and will help in the safety of the community. So we'll understand why it's coming on board.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I see we are back with Council Member Kent Keel. Do you have any comments on this study session item?
No, Mayor, I have no comments. No, Mayor, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank staff for their due diligence on this. And this is an item that we review on a yearly basis and update. And it's all dependent on our ability to get funding on these various projects, but I'm really appreciative of the staff's efforts and trying to keep the schedule up to date as far as cost goes, as well as looking at creative ways that we might be able to bring these projects into a smaller scope that might aid us in obtaining the funding from our various sources. So I have no direct questions at this time. I just want to say thank you to staff, and I look forward to having this brought forward for consideration at a future meeting. So with that, I gathered from the comments for council that there's no need to go through a second rotation for comments at this time. So we will be moving on to our next study session item, the RCO grant applications, and I ask that Mr. Gary Cooper come forward and provide us with a presentation, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, fellow council members. Thank you for inviting me to come in tonight. I'm Gary Cooper, Director of Public Works, Parks and Facilities. And I wanted to provide an update on where we are with the RCO grant process for applying for capital improvement project grants for parks. But before I get into the specifics, I want to remind council and those that are watching at home how the proposed park improvement projects were developed. In June of last year, the Park Advisory Commission volunteers took on the challenge of updating the park capital improvement project list. Starting with reviewing the projects remaining from the last time it was updated in 2014, then working together, reviewing and assessing the needs, developing a list of potential park improvements. I hope everyone appreciates the efforts this group of volunteers have put in for this process. Over a period of nearly 6 months, numerous night meetings, developed a list of potential park capital improvement projects to make our park systems even better than they are today. On a parallel track, last August, City Council approved hiring SCJ consultants to work with staff and the Park Advisory Commission in updating the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, or PROS plan. This plan is required by the Recreation and Conservation Office, or RCO, just as the TIP is in engineering. It requires to have this plan in place to make us eligible to receive grant funding from their office. It must be updated every 6 years in this case. Consultant working with the Park Advisory Commission performed an assessment of each park property, reached out to our citizens with several surveys and questionnaires to help determine what our citizens desired for our parks. This effort required multiple evening meetings between the Park Advisory Commission, staff, and the consultants, but the effort was noticed. Our RCO representatives said that the CIP plan within our PROS plan is the example she will be using in her trainings on how to develop an excellent PROS plan. So again, I'd like to thank the citizens that took the time to answer the surveys and the University Place Park Advisory Commission for all work required to develop a pros plan of this level. And with that, I'm going to try and share the memo screen. So, Mayor, can you confirm if that came up?
Yes, I see it.
Okay, thank you. So back on March 16th, the updated pros plan was adopted by City Council and approved the plan to be forwarded to the RCO. Coincidentally, the very next day, the governor's stay at home, stay safe directive came out, slowing down not only our offices, but also their offices. On April 1st, the plan was approved by the RCO. This authorized University Place to apply for grant funding. So the categories that are out there this year are local parks, land and water conservation fund, youth athletic facilities, and trails. The projects contained in our pros plan that most align with the criteria outlined by RCO in the local parks and land and water category for this year. So working within the stay-at-home order and keeping in mind we had 1 month to put these projects together, we identified 5 projects that we believe would be best for funding into 2 identified categories. 5 projects we selected are on the Park Advisory Commission's priority list and in the pros plan. At Cirque Park, skate park renovation has been one of the long wished for projects in there. Develop new features and challenges for skaters, adding 14 permanent above ground concrete features to the existing skate park. Cost for this project is $385,000. Also at Cirque Park, asphalt paved the existing 1,600-foot gravel walking path surrounding the park to provide an ADA compliant walking path. This will also connect the path to the crosswalk at Bridgeport Way. Cost for this project, $48,000. In addition to the trail, we put in the adding 9 fitness stations along the walking path. This was in a grant that we had previously applied for, but were unsuccessful. The reason this is important is it checks the box for exercise and fitness, and it gives us extra points on that. So in addition to making the path ADA compliant, if you add the exercise and fitness, you get extra points on your grant, and it's very important because these are very competitive grants. The 4th project at Cirque Park is to expand the playground. Currently, we have a playground there that's the features are designed for 3 to 5-year-old kids. We want to bump this up for the gap we're missing, the 5 to 12 age group. So that's $375,000. I do have to say that we just got an updated cost estimate from the supplier of the playground, and we'll be able to trim about $75,000 off that price when we submit. So that's the 4 projects at Cirque Park. The 5th project that we wish to submit for is at the current Apple Orchard Park, and that is to construct a new multi-age agricultural themed playground. And that will be right down in the corner of the park property at the corner of Brookside and Grandview. And just like the other playground project, they did notify us that we can trim about $75,000 off that project. That just came in late today, so we didn't have time to change the text on that then. So the submittal strategy is we're going to double up. We're going to on Cirque Park, based on a meeting with the RCO advisor in the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Many of the criteria are same as the local parks. So their advice is we submit 2 grants for Cirque Park. That doubles our chances of being successful and hopefully being funded. So we hope that works out. This is very, very competitive. The last time this was offered in 2018, there was approximately 229 applications and only 69 awards. So it's very competitive. And so anything you can do to get a couple of points on any one of the projects, that is great. There will be some questions. Why didn't we select some of the other projects that are on the list? There's over 81 CIP project lists. Well, just to run through a few, one of the projects that's been long wanted is synthetic turf fields at Cirque Park. But given the cost of this project, estimated at nearly $2 million, without a city's recreation program, we believe that prioritization of this project warrants additional conversation with council. So as a result of that, we couldn't meet this timelines to get this into this grant cycle. One of the other wish list projects at Cirque Park was sports courts south of the area reserved for the community center. And I think you all can probably recall that there was much discussion on this community center with council and the park commission and the consultant. And what came out of that, and it's actually in the pros plan review, is a suggestion to review the master plan to see if the community center is still desired. If we believe it is, we need to sit down and do a site plan for that area to figure out how a community center, the required parking lot, and the sports courts could all fit on that same site. Such a discussion and development of a site plan, we simply could not do within the 30-day window we had to get this plan put together for submittal. Well, I think it's a great project. The timing isn't there for this round of grants. And with that, before I go to conclusion, I'll catch my breath and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. At this time, we are on council comments and questions. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Keel. Gary, appreciate your presentation and all the projects that are at the Cirque Park. I understand why they're there, particularly like the fitness centers. I wonder if an old guy can get around that. You know, I might have to use them, I think, here pretty soon. I think it's something that was a long time coming. And so I'm excited about being able to present them this time in this project, this proposal. I do appreciate also your discussion around the other 2 items that we long talked about, the turf and the sports courts, as well as the facility itself. And I'm encouraged to know that staff hasn't forgotten about those things. And I'm hopeful and confident that council is going to continue to have these 2 things in front of mind as we continue to develop, our parks and that. Now, there was one other park that you didn't talk about, we talked about before, and I'm wondering if you're going to mention that. There's some other needs in other places too, as well, that's been talked about a lot. And so I'm hopeful in your conclusion that you'll talk a little bit about that, or at least tell us why other parks aren't proposed, other things in other parks weren't proposed for this grant as well.
Yes, I will. On the Park Advisory Commission, one of their priorities has been to concentrate on Cirque Park. The goal was to maybe get a park done before we jumped around too much. So that's why we concentrated 4 projects at Cirque Park. That was one of those reasons. I'm not sure if the other project you're alluding to is the restroom or restroom projects that have been also on the plan. Specifically, there's one at Kern Apple Orchard. As there was much discussion and many questions as to what goes into siting a restroom at a park and what are the safety concerns, what are the maintenance concerns, what are the cost concerns, we asked the consultant to actually do a white paper discussing all of the, and I hate to use the word pros and cons, but all the factors that must be concerned before you site a restroom. So that's in process now. We expect that to be done shortly. And then I think that whenever we get a chance to get together and we can have a good discussion about restrooms and in the parks and those type of things, once we get some clear direction, and then we could go forward on that. But I will say, even if when the pros plan on the 16th was adopted, if council would have said, we want to go forward with the restroom, a project like that at the Orchard requires a sewer system connection into Grandview Drive or a sewer system to be built on site and all that type of engineering. I think a project like that realistically would be 6 to 8 months before it was shovel ready. So with those two main considerations, that's why the restrooms were not part of this grant application process.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
thank you. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Cooper, for your detailed report and thoughtful explanation of all these. You know, as you know, parks are a passionate entity. You know, they're built for fun, but around it all, there's a lot of passion. There's a lot of interests. And I believe you looked at things neutrally, looked at all the comments from our park advisory commissioners who did an exemplary job, and the consultants, as well as listened to council as well, putting all those things together and placed it in the criteria for to create a higher possibility of us to hopefully get a RCO grant. So with that, I like the idea that the Cirque Park is being focused on. It's an underserved park, and so with these added amenities and details, I'm hoping that it will encourage people to come and use it, especially with the ADA component that will be added to it, and also the play equipment that will expand the age group to 12 years old, and the much needed skateboard park renovation as well. And the site at the Kern Apple Orchard, expanding the playground there. And my only comment is the rocks that are on site, the climbing rocks. If we could keep those rocks and place them somewhere else in the park so that the kids will have an alternative site and use in another part of the orchard as well. So thank you for all the work. The CIP list remains, and everyone's projects have been heard and placed on that. And so we will revisit that as needed or as the fundings are available. They're limited fundings, as well as our time is limited in this round, but at least we have something going in the chute with possibilities to enhance our parks in the next couple years. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. I need to apologize. I overlooked Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. So sorry, Mr. Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. That's all right, Madam Mayor. As a lesser esteemed colleague, I'm used to that kind of treatment. Anyway, I appreciate Director Cooper's kind words concerning the Park Advisory Board. They are a group of volunteers who work tirelessly to make sure that our parks are the best that they can be. Many people worked on the pros plan, the city staff, several council members, and the consultants. And of all the people that worked on the pros plan, only the commissioners were the ones who did not receive a salary. Their pay was to hope that we can continue to have the quality of life here in University Place that we have in the past. They are truly volunteers of the finest sense, and I want to thank them. To move on to the projects, I appreciate what the park staff has done on proposing these projects, especially in the short time frame that we have to work with before these grants have to be submitted. The question I have, and Director Cooper had informed me previously that all the parks were ADA, all the playgrounds were ADA compliant. The one at Kern Apple Orchard could be, I'm sure, ADA compliant, but it would end up being an ADA oasis in a park that didn't have ADA access. So if you could make it to the park, it would be very difficult to get to that playground if you were handicapped. I'm not sure how we can get around that, but in any event. The second question I have was and it was brought up, was the restroom. And I've also talked to Director Cooper about this, and there are other more sophisticated mobile restrooms that are almost a complete sewage system contained. And Sumner High School has one. It's mobile and it's self-contained, and it could be used in our city at various locations if one was needed. And yet it could be down there at the current apple orchard. I don't know what the cost is. I do know that they are expensive, but I certainly I support the playground itself, because I think that once that gets built, it's going to attract more people. And I have various views on the rock, but that's another story. Anyway, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Councilmember Fleming.
That's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Madam Mayor. You know, the parks and the parks program certainly from the outset for me has been a priority. I appreciate the presentation that Gary presented tonight, and I applaud those who've worked on that particular project. And I certainly admire the hard work that went into that, but the difficult tasks they had in prioritizing the projects that we're going to go after in this grant. The other thing that stood out to me during Gary's presentation was the fact that people remained very cognizant of the needs and the wants versus the actual what it's going to cost to do it, and certainly being good stewards of the limited resources that we have, and then putting that all together in the package that Gary has presented, I think is awesome. This will be one of those added accolades for this city, and certainly for the members of the community of all ages. So we didn't target one age group. I think everybody, regardless of your age, gets a little bit of something out of the project should these come to fruition. So again, job well done, and thank you, Gary, for that presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. At this time, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mayor Belisi. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington has a couple of quick comments. So first off, Mr. Cooper, appreciated you going over the reasoning and why choices were made. And fortunately, we have to make choices. And I think you showed, demonstrated that you did that in a very thoughtful way. Our community has a long list of needs and wants. The Parks Advisory Commission's done an excellent job of working through that and helping us identify those. At the same time, we need to balance that with what we can be able to match, afford, if you will, even in a grant proposal. And then also, we need to make sure that to the best of our ability, it's going to be a competitive grant. And I know you've taken special efforts to understand where you could get those extra points that can help us be competitive. So at the end of the day, we get a grant. It perhaps could have focused on different projects, but if it doesn't score competitively, it doesn't really matter what it focused on. Primarily, we need to have something that is going to be as high in success rate as possible. And this is a good list. And I think Councilmember Fleming did point it out. It serves a number of different parts of our community. And I'm hopeful it will be competitive, though it's a tough world out there in the grant process. And we'll see how it plays. But you, the Parks Advisory Commission, you and your team, Mr. Cooper, have worked on this. And I think it will be competitive. It looks that way to me. I think the list also works well to serve our citizens. So I don't really have any questions, but did want to wrap up on a few comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington. I echo basically all the comments made by my fellow council members, and in particular, I do want to thank the Parks Advisory Commission for their due diligence and efforts in helping staff and council prioritize the needs of the citizens and doing the outreach that was needed to get our PROS plan completed. I think since my term on the council, this has been one of the more active and engaged advisory commission members that we have had. And they have done their due diligence in making sure that we are cognizant of our needs and helping us to prioritize those needs against the funding that we have available. And staff has really worked diligently with the advisory commission to come up with a list of priorities and develop an application that we're going to be hopefully submitting for this RCO grant. And fingers crossed that we get the funding needed to be able to put some new things into Cirque Park and into the current apple orchard that will benefit our community as a whole. It's always nice to have wants, but the big thing is to have the offsetting funding that can make those wants a reality. And without engaged citizens, it makes it very difficult to ensure that we have met the broadest spectrum of our community's needs. So I don't have any particular questions. I think this whole process with the PROS plan and the grant process has been very transparent and very thorough with both staff and the Parks Commission and our citizens. And I look forward to having this come forward for our consideration when we become successful in getting this, and we can have a groundbreaking that shows the efforts and be able to celebrate these projects. I gathered from the council comments that there were no additional need for a second round of comments. Am I seeing that correct? Can I have a thumbs up from council members? Okay, great job, guys. So at this time, we'll move on to our final agenda item, which is our court services agreements. And with that, I will turn over the camera to both our attorney, Matt Kaiser, and Jennifer Hales, our public safety person.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Matt Kaiser, City Attorney. Also on the line with me is Jennifer Hales, our Public Safety Administrator. Tonight, we're going to be talking to you about our court services agreement. And I'm going to bring up a very short 2-slide PowerPoint. And if I can, let's see if I can work the technology on my end. If I can get it. And I don't know if it's showing up. It's showing up on my, it does appear to be showing up on my screen.
Yes, it shows up.
All right, thank you. I want to give the council a little bit of context why it is that we are talking tonight about our court services agreement. In a nutshell, our current court services agreement with Lakewood for municipal court services expires at the end of this year. We were aware of the impending expiration of this late in 2019, and as a result, we started looking at various alternatives. Our purpose tonight in talking to council is to get council direction on what steps council would like to go with respect to future court services agreements. In the course of this process, we had identified 3 separate options, and I'll talk to council about those options, the pros and cons of those options, and the like. The first option is to maintain the status quo with Lakewood. We've had a court services agreement with Lakewood since approximately 2011 or thereabouts. The second option is to execute a new interlocal with Pierce County. We have a proposal from Pierce County that's included in the packet. That proposal is for a 4-year deal with rates and escalators and like, and we'll talk about that in a second too. And then a third option is to bring court services in-house. As part of this process, we also had the opportunity to review or solicit input from another municipality as to whether they were willing to submit an offer to us for court services. That municipality at the end of the day chose not to do so. At this point, I'll shift gears over to Jennifer. She can give a little bit of context in terms of the history of our court services agreements.
Good evening, council members. So great to hear your voices tonight and see your faces during this pandemic. Councilmember Fleming will remember back in 2009 or just at the 2008 economic downturn when the county approached us with a new model for court services that was to be cost prohibitive within about 5 years. As a part of that process, we approached our partners, many of the same whom we've approached this time, to see if we could work out a better deal or something that looked a little more cost appropriate and predictable. At that time, Lakewood was looking at layoffs, and they were interested in offsetting their costs by entering into a partnership with us. And the partnership was built on a flat rate model. So we would pay them a flat rate every year that was easily budgetable, and they would keep all of our fees and all of our revenues at the time. So we did a cost analysis, a pretty comprehensive cost analysis, examining the same options here that Mr. Kaiser has laid out for you, and determined that at that time it made the most sense for the city to move into an agreement with Lakewood. Matt?
Thanks, Jennifer. So what we did, as I shared a few minutes ago, is we outlined 3 tentative options in terms of future court services modeling. And I'll preface this with a bit of an overview. Some of what Jennifer had talked about back in the early part of the decade are trends that we are beginning to see again. In terms of trying to ensure that, do we still have cost predictability? Do we know what cases are going through? Do we have long-term deals? Do we have the ability to monitor our numbers and the like? And so what we did was, in looking at this, we outlined, first of all, the key component obviously is cost. What does it cost to run a court? Lakewood in the last year has changed models. They have moved to a model that they call essentially the fair share model. In our current interlocal, there's language, and it's quoted in the council memo, that they have the ability to charge a pro rata share for all the court services and the like. The challenge with, well, that sounds good. The challenge with that is how do you know what the actual charge is going to be? And I think of it very akin to, if you were going to take a trip on an airplane, your airplane manufacturer or your airline, they build the airplane, they figure out how to staff the airplane, they figure out how much gas, how much food to stock on the airplane. You buy the ticket, you know what the ticket price is going to be, and you go to your destination. Under this model, you don't know what the price is going to be until long after you land. And they do a cost reconciliation at the end of the year with their other customers and determine, are we issuing you a refund? Or are we going to come back to you for more of a bill? And some of that challenge you have seen in some of the materials in the packet. When we were trying to identify some of the estimates for both 2019 and 2020, those have been all over the place. We were told as late for 2019 numbers, we were told back in October of 2018 of a projected estimate of around $294,000. Only a few months later, in March of 2019, we were given an estimate of approximately $230,000. And then the final number that we received, just recently as part of the year-end reconciliation, came down to about $211,000. That's a fairly large swing in terms of identifying where things are. For 2020, their projection in November was $338,000. Now we have been given a projection of around $270,000. It's also important to note that when we got that $238,000 projection, that was about $100,000 more than what we had been led to believe for our 2019 numbers at that point in time. The offer from Pierce County is approximately a $280,000 charge with a contract escalator of 2.5%. We do know from preliminary discussions with Lakewood that there are going to be what we have termed legacy costs. Those are cases that are already in the pipeline that we've largely paid for with Lakewood, but there's going to be some residual costs. We don't know what those are, and it would require that we negotiate those. We also looked at if we were to bring this in-house, and not to keep the suspense up, bringing it in-house is not a recommended option on the part of staff. We do know that on the low end, and this is a very conservative number, we're looking at about $100,000 capital costs annually, just in terms of initial building out our facility, software licensing, that sort of thing. We are also projecting about 3+ FTEs annually. That doesn't include the judge, and we do have the concern of where are we going to put a municipal court. Commonly, court itself for a number of municipalities is held in council chambers. But you still got to figure out, do you want it in the council chambers? Do you want it somewhere else? Where are you going to house your court staff? So those are concerns that we would have to address. Those do carry dollar figure concerns. On revenues, under all three versions, presumably, University Place would retain its revenue. I say presumably because under our current agreement with Lakewood, we do retain the revenue. Pierce County's offer, we retain the revenue. And if we brought it in-house, obviously we would retain the revenue. On the services that are included in the contract, for both Lakewood and Pierce County, if we went with a contract model, those historically have been included with the contract with Lakewood. Those are included in the contract with Pierce County. If we brought it in-house, we would have to figure out how are we going to deliver that service. Do we have a contract prosecutor? Do we have an FTE assigned to it? The same, and it's not noted on here, is the same is true with indigent defense services. We're required to provide public defender services. Those are included with the contracts with outsourcing it to both Lakewood and Pierce County. If we brought it in-house, we would have to figure out how are we going to deliver that. Do you have a public defender on staff? Do you hire that out? With therapeutic courts are also these are a major consideration for us too. What a therapeutic court is, it's a court that identifies individuals who have a common set of issues that keep bringing them in front of the courts. Drug courts are the best known of those. Those are typically folks who have had drug and or alcohol related concerns that keep on bringing them back into the criminal justice system. By targeting the drug and or alcohol concerns, you're able to break that cycle. Veterans Court is a relatively recent phenomenon where you identify individuals who are military veterans, whether they're honorably discharged or dishonorably discharged. And as a result of their military service, that presents issues that have brought them into contact with the criminal justice system. Pierce County has both a drug court and a veterans court. Lakewood has a veterans court. If we brought it in-house, we would have to determine how would you like to staff it. Probation is also key when you're dealing with a court of limited jurisdiction model like a municipal court. People talk about, hey, we'll just take them to court, they'll plead guilty or they'll resolve their case and that's that. A court of limited jurisdiction, whether it's a municipal court or a district court, is built on what they call a rehabilitative justice model. What that is that you continue to monitor your offenders. And the best way and the key way of monitoring them is probation. Pierce County has a dedicated probation department. Lakewood has what we would call a dispersed probation department. Their probation, they don't have a dedicated probation officer per se. They have several people wearing a probation officer hat, but they're also wearing other hats too. If you go back to my really bad example a few minutes ago when I was talking about airplanes, it's the difference between your in-flight meal where you said, here's your meal, or here's some crackers, here's a juice box, and you're told that's a meal. Both are an in-flight meal, but one is something that you think of as a meal as opposed to the other. One of the big draws for us on this is Pierce County, and I think they are probably one of the few out there, Jennifer, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, if not the only one that we are aware of, that has a community resource center. This is a relatively new model where as part of getting people who have had their brushes with the criminal justice system back on track, what it does is it puts them in touch with resources, finding jobs, finding housing, getting them in touch with those resources so they can integrate back as productive members of society, more so and above and beyond what a probationary model might be. And it's basic stuff. How do you write a resume? How do you, supplying clothes for job interviews, that sort of thing. It's one of those models that has tremendous upside in our opinion, but it's not one that's commonly out there being done. And then the final piece of considerations are prisoner transports. Both Lakewood and Pierce County, if we were to do that, those would be included as part of any rate. Lakewood's fair share model charges on a pro rata basis. So you buy that portion of a transport officer's time. So if you're doing a lot of transports, that's a lot of charges. If you're not doing a lot of transports, you're not doing a lot of that. If we brought it in-house, obviously we would need to determine how are we going to bring prisoner transfers for those criminal cases from the Pierce County Jail back to wherever we decide to house a court facility, who's doing it and whatnot. So where does that leave us at the end of the day? I'm trying to get out of my PowerPoint. We have this agreement that's coming up for expiration at the end of the year. We do require council direction in terms of what the next steps are. The staff recommendation on this is that we proceed with negotiations with Pierce County District Court to finalize and execute an agreement with them. In addition, part of that and the next steps would also be negotiating with Lakewood in terms of an exit agreement to handle any of those legacy cases. We've had preliminary discussions with Lakewood. They have indicated that they don't think that those costs are going to be very high and that those legacy cases would remain with them. There doesn't seem to be too much angst along those lines. So with that, I don't know, Jennifer, if you had anything else. I'm happy, between the two of us, we're happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Sure, I just have one thing to add, Matt. On the resource center piece, I did feature, in spite of us not contracting with the county, they are always happy to come out and feature their resource center. In other words, it's available to all residents or anyone from any community. And they did come to our crime-free multi-housing seminar that we offer to our rental community. And I was so impressed with the services that they offer. Many tenants that are getting into trouble with their rent and unable to maybe lose their job and can't pay their rent. They have resources that they offer. I think particularly right now, as we think about this pandemic and the outfall, sort of the things that are going to come as a result of that we need to be thinking about this type of service to our residents, this resource center. So that's all I have, Matt.
All right, and with that, between the two of us, we'll turn it back to council.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, Council Member Figueroa, do you have any comments or questions?
Matt, thank you so much for your presentation. My only comment I have is that obviously we need to know what our cost is. We can't be subject to any cost that we might not be able to afford. So I would lean toward the council seriously considering the Pierce County benefits in addition to understanding costs, but also the additional benefits that are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Figueroa. Council Member Keel.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question. Matt, could you put back up your slide, the one with the three options again?
Yeah, let me see if I can break this.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I can tell you on my end, I was getting slow network warnings. So let me.
Well, let me see if I can do it by. The question I had was, I can't do it. I got it. It was the third one down.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up on my end now.
Sorry, Mayor. Well, yeah, the second one.
Oh, there we go.
Let's go. All right, so, oh. There it is. Okay, great. So you talked a little bit about, now I'm waiting for my screen to clear. So the revenues, a couple of things. First, about our revenues keeps. Could you talk a little bit about what our revenues are, ballpark? Those are.
Our revenues are variable. And generally what qualifies as revenues are fines that are retained at the local level. So for example, on a traffic ticket, just a garden variety speeding ticket, a portion of that will get sent off to the state. What doesn't get sent off to the state comes back locally. Part of the danger with talking about revenues in these scenarios is really twofold. The first is, if you're trying to figure out your costs, is you're trying to come up as best as you can with an apples to apples, just so you know what your outlay is across the board. The second is, if you ask most judicial officers, and this is a philosophy I do adhere to, is that they will tell you that courts are not profit centers. You know, you're not in the business of issuing tickets for the purpose of getting fines and the revenue back in the door. So when we're talking about University Place keeping the revenue, I looked at this as essentially a neutral consideration across the board. So 1 month you can have high revenues, 1 month you can have low revenues. In Lakewood memo, when they used the offset, I don't have the exact number in front of me, it's identified in the packet. It does bring the cost down, to be sure, you know, our end of the day out of pocket. But it's not a consideration to the extent that we keep the revenue across all three scenarios.
Yeah. Oops, I need the red box.
You can talk, Mr. Keel.
Oh, okay, great. I was waiting for the red box. Oh, there it is. So I guess my comment on this thing is that we be real clear about, or we can articulate what we think the ballpark of what our revenue is, as opposed to, oh, it's variable, we don't know, it's kind of go up and down. I know we got to know the number because we keep track of everything every year, right? So
Yeah.
we can say this year it was this other year it was a different number, and it was that, and the third year was a different number. So people get a feel for what that revenue is, and then you can split out, this much with the state. Just talk about what we get. Because I think a lot of people in the public think that we get, and I've heard this, millions of dollars from tickets or from stuff that we do. I mean, and I know that's not the case, but that's a perception. And if we don't say, no, we got $10,000 that we kept, whatever the number is, and then talk about it, I think that's a good, I think, clarification for people to understand that, and then we could talk about what we offset. So the other question I had was around, and I think you've answered it a little bit, around those, and I can't see the bottom row if you go scroll up. I think that's the transportation piece.
Yeah.
So, and it says with rate. So can you, again, I think that's another, and I'm using air quotes,
I'm throwing it up full screen. Yeah.
That's another hidden cost or unknown cost or variable cost. So again, what's the feel for what does it cost per transport, and then about how many transports we have? Again, that speaks to being very transparent about what our costs are, so that council knows and the public knows what that is.
Yeah. The end of the day number here. I'm fighting a slow computer here all of a sudden.
Maybe we got to buy you a new computer.
Oh, it's a good computer. It's just slow and sluggish right now, and I don't know if it's showing up on your end or not.
That's not good. That's not my definition of good.
Yeah. We can follow up with you separately on that.
Okay.
But we do have an approximate number on that, but we can follow up separately with you.
Right, and and that's okay if you don't have the number now, but I'm just saying as we go forward with this, and it speaks to Councilmember Figueroa is concerned about our costs, and I think all of us are concerned about the cost, and that's what we're talking about. It's going to be cheaper. We need to peel back all of those costs so that we all know everything. What's going out and what's going on. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Keel. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. I have a question about the Veterans Court Services. Are they similar between the two cities, or is one different from the other?
In terms of level of service, or
the kinds of service, programs?
My understanding is that there is a difference. The Lakewood one is relatively new to the punch. Lakewood has been with Veterans Court, I would say probably for about 5 years. They do have the integrated ties with some of the Veterans Administration service providers over there. In addition, the pool of veterans, certainly at least at the time, speaking about 3 years ago, was relatively small. The Pierce County model, I understand, is more developed, more robust, more advanced.
About 2 years ago, I tried to find out how many veterans there were in University Place, and it's kind of hard to track, but it looked to me like there was around 3,000, maybe 2,500 retired, just veterans, which would be about 10% of our population. I'm just wondering if one service was better than the other. I mean, not that that's
I view them as largely neutral.
Okay, that's what
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Councilmember McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. And Matt and Jennifer, thank you for your report. So the Community Resource Center that was listed just under Pierce County, that is open to everyone, whether or not we have a contract with Pierce County or not. Correct?
That is true.
Yes.
That is true. Okay, thank you. I too am looking towards the Pierce County model for our court services. I would like to know a little more explicitly about the exit dollars from Lakewood. I know there's a few residual cases, so just to kind of give me a ball frame, you know, for curiosity. And then the prisoner transport is included in the Pierce County model as well. I did, you know, in the verbiage, it seemed like it was taken out, but I'll go with your graph. I like the graph better. And the property, the property and storage component, is that a cost to University Place, or will that be under the Pierce County model as well?
The property and cost component
Mm-hmm.
of what part?
The storage of the property and the maintenance, the archiving. I know Pierce County has a large repertory of
Okay.
of
It's
that.
an all-in charge.
All in charge?
Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you. And the cost of, let's see, what do I have? So it's a 4-year contract, 2.5. Okay, I think that answers all my questions right at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Councilmember Fleming.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Matt and Jennifer, for your presentation. Matt, I'm going to trouble you one more time if you could throw that same graph back up on the screen so that I'm not jumping all over.
Yeah, let me see if I can break the computer again here.
I will help you. I'm very good at that stuff.
Rumor has it that's the case. I had actually closed it so the computer would run just a little faster.
I sure hope you're not working off a 287.
No, that's the sad thing.
Okay, if you could go to the
yeah, I'm
second slide, if you would, please.
yeah.
No, the thing that I want to be certain is that we are truly comparing apples to apples as we deliberate this. And I do recall, Jennifer pointed out, back when we attempted the first time to do a contract with Pierce County, you know, while they have a well-established track record there, again, are we really being sure that we're getting the best bang for our investment there?
Oh.
When you look at, you know, the Pierce County versus in-house, you talk about the 280 approximately plus a 2.5%. So that brings that roughly to about 287 or more on that contract. But what I don't know with that particular proposal is how many staff members are we getting committed to University Place with that cost? I know when you look at the bring it in-house, it said 3 FTEs or more, but Pierce County, it doesn't say anything. So are we getting 3 or more FTEs dedicated to the city only, or are we just kind of randomly getting whoever gets our cases at the county courts? That's my first question.
Okay. It's a twofold. First, with respect to the actual court personnel, you know, in terms of court clerks, judges, that sort of thing, we're gaining an economy of scale. Pierce County District Court has, I think it's 8 judges. There is not going to be a dedicated University Place judge. We'll get the benefit of the full Pierce County District Court bench as well as the support staff. The contract separately provides, and there's verbiage in there, I'm fighting the computer trying to bring it up, the opportunity for a county prosecutor that would be primarily assigned on the University Place side of things, or that we would have the ability to access that prosecutor.
Okay. Also, when we look at that transport. Do you know, like within the last 5 years or 3 or 4 years, how many prisoners that the city has transferred from the court to the county jail?
We can get that number for you.
Okay. And I don't know what proportion of that cost is, but I'm presuming that someone's calculated how many FTEs plus transport time, et cetera, vehicles and what have you to move prisoners. Is that ever looked at as a pay-as-you-go possibility? So, for example, if we're only transporting one in 5 years, does it really make sense to try to make it a lump sum proposal? I don't know. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, Lakewood did run those numbers for 2019. I'm fighting the computer and trying to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is I don't crash on you. We can get those numbers separately. I'm having.
All right, don't worry about it. If you could offline, just so we don't delay council time here.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. I just want to be sure as we're looking at the graph here that we're looking, number one, apples to apples, and two, making sure that as we break it down into these subcategories, that it really is, at the end of the day, beneficial to the city. And that's my only concern there. So with that, Madam Mayor, thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Thank you, Mayor Bellisi. Let's see, a couple of observations and a question, I guess. One is, of the three different options we have, probably the one that I think we have the highest risk of exposure to is if we were to operate the court system ourselves. I think to begin with, the capitalization cost is at $100,000 a year for 3 years probably isn't really going to cover it. That, as the notes in the packet indicate, that's a conservative estimate, and I think it's frankly quite a bit more than that. I also think the FTE count may not quite be as inclusive as we need. We may need more to have a basic functioning court, but perhaps that'll make sense. We can tighten those numbers, but I feel like that's the one I have the least confidence in and has the most risk for us as well. It also interrupts the way we do business and moves us into internalizing services that we've been externalizing before. So we've had them outside. We've had them outside, I think, because they've been more cost effective and have worked for our citizens. Of the two remaining ones, I find myself thinking quite a bit about the Pierce County example, and certainly cost is a big part of it. That is a slightly higher cost in the near term, but it looks like it's a more stable, predictable cost over the long run that we can see what's going on. And would appear to be something like $10,000 more a year in the near term. But it also delivers more services that can help people find a path out of the bad things they're doing. And the therapeutic courts that they have listed there are some tools to help us do that, and tools to help them find ways to change their lives. And that, I think, has a lot of value for everyone. If they stumble and can find their feet back underneath them and move on into back on the right path, I think that can be very important for all involved. But we need to understand our costs, certainly. I did drill down a bit into the cost earlier as I was looking at the packet, and there are some numbers there about some of the things we're asking about, but we can get all of those in a next presentation if that time's available, and have a chance for all of us to kind of wrap our heads around there. There's also an interesting phenomenon in the numbers. If you were to look at the volume of cases for UP, for us, for our other cities being served by Lakewood, Steilacoom and DuPont, and compare those and compare some of the cost associated with those, there just leaves me scratching my head trying to figure out how are those numbers the way they are, both in terms of the size of those populations, the number of cases, and the cost share as a result. It's just a bit perplexing. Those are some of the things that I've been working through, and in my mind. But a 4-year term with the county, to me, that's of interest, though we need to know more and have a chance to get deep into the cost. So, Mayor, thank you. Appreciate a chance to comment.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. At this time, I think a lot of my questions were already addressed by other council members. However, for our next review or consideration on this, I think as a citizen, the figures in your slide that you presented cost-wise don't answer the question of total costs that we're looking at. And I know that having our own court system, there's some unknown costs, such as even citing where the court would be, the tenant improvements to get a court in University Place, how much we're looking at. But I think I would like to see something along the lines of the number of staff people Lakewood has dedicated to representing UP versus what I realize with Pierce County, we have everybody in the pool that will be addressing our clients. And so it'd be harder to come up with an FTE total, but bringing it in-house, the FTEs, what's the total people needed to get all the court services and the prosecution, the therapeutic, probation, resource, etc. That's needed, because I hear a lot of citizens saying if we had our own courts in-house and we got to keep the revenues, we would be sailing away with lots of money and we could increase our police force. So I think we really need to batten down those numbers so that when we do make our decision, we can make it in a reliable way and be able to present the information in-house or to our constituents. And saying bringing in-house, while it sounds good, reality doesn't pencil out for us. And part of it is in the revenues. Everybody says we would make millions in revenues and we could offset our court costs and have extra left over. But if we could provide a chart that shows what our average costs over the last 3 years at Lakewood has been, what the court costs were, what our anticipated revenues were, how many prisoners or tickets were issued, I think it gives us a better understanding of how that might relate to what we are getting per ticket, per court cost under Pierce County a little bit, to be able to justify or understand the $208,000 price tag, and then extrapolate it hopefully for an in-house look. I am personally leaning towards Pierce County, but I think in order to really do this with a straight face and be able to address it to the community as a whole, we need to be able to have a better grasp of what the total dollars are that are needed. And I realize bringing it in-house, you're pulling numbers together, best guess estimate, but we really do, I think, need to do it. Otherwise, we're going to have our constituents saying that we take the easy way out and we're foregoing a lot of revenue. So with that, those are my comments and concerns on the presentation. Are there any other? Do I need to go through a second round? Are there additional comments or concerns from council members?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, Council Member Kent Keel.
Great, thank you, Mayor. I make a comment and I have a question. So my comment is, I agree with you and Councilmember Fleming around the cost, and your comments was exactly the reason why I asked a question about the cost. And this is to staff and Mr. Sugg in particular. we already have issues within our community around public safety and people questioning about dollars, the cost, the amount of officers we have on the street, all of that stuff. And there's a bunch of intrepidation and questions and concerns about what we're doing and how we're spending the money. We have to, in my opinion, we have to make doubly sure that we don't exacerbate the problem with this. Okay, we have got to be very transparent, very circumspect. We have to look at every penny and lay it out in a way that makes sense so the public understands clearly what it is that we're spending. Because guess what? We still have to have that other conversation about patrol officers. And you know, we're going to really wrap ourselves around the axle if we, and this is a technical term, if we screw it up. Okay, and so we can't do that. All right, and that's what we got to make sure we don't do. So that's my comment. The question I have is, Matt, when Councilmember McCluskey was asking a question, she asked a question about, and I think the term was all charges were all inclusive charge for transportation, and I didn't read the chart that way. I thought it said included with rate and included with rate adjusted, and so I want to make sure that my understanding of included with rate, what that means. I mean, to me, it means, yeah, you do it, but there's a rate, and if you have, depending upon how many transports you have, your cost is going to vary because they're charging you for each transport. Am I understanding that right?
With Lakewood, that is how the Lakewood modeling works. So that way you're charged, the overall transport charge is dispersed amongst all 4 participating jurisdictions. So if we have a disproportionately high number of transports, we're going to see a disproportionately high number in that cost bucket. With Pierce County included is what we have been told. So we will cinch that up with them.
So if 1 year we had 100 transports, we pay the same number and then the next year we have 200 transports, it's still going to be the same number?
Same number with Pierce County.
Okay, all right, good. That does clear it up. I was wrong. I thought it had a Lakewood model still. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
And
Council, Mayor, this is Javier. If you can put me on. Thank you, Mayor. One comment I'd like for the council to consider as we move forward with this is the fact that as we all know, we have the regional designation of receiving more population than some of our neighbors, neighboring cities. And so we know, and can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, okay. So we know we're expecting and we're building and zoning for a bigger population. And with a bigger population, we will get more crime and just the percentages go up. Along with that, as has been alluded to, that we're not sure exactly how we're going to keep up with our police force. And so crime will go up, especially when we don't have the sufficient police force to be out there. I think that the Pierce County affords us options or opportunities to keep the cost down as transports increased, and they will. So that's where I'm heading to. Where are we going as a city, and how does this look in providing us the additional services without being nickel and dime to death? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Figueroa. Okay, I think we've all had our input, and I think staff has an understanding of what additional questions, concerns, or information they need to bring forward at our next meeting on this topic. So with that, seeing no additional comments or concerns, we are at the end of our council meeting this evening. I want to thank all the council members and staff for this excellent meeting. It definitely was an improvement over our last meeting. So with that, I will adjourn our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.